As coronavirus cases increased in early 2020, students in universities around the world suddenly found themselves taking their courses online. But what about students learning a second language? Is it really possible to learn a new language through online courses? What are the pros and cons? What does it take to be a successful student in an online environment? Welcome to Lost in Translation, the podcast of the Intensive English Program at West Virginia University, or the IEP for short. My name is Brittany. I'm a language instructor at the IEP and your host. In this episode, I talk with Dr. Jhon Cuesta-Medina, a language instructor who specializes in instructional technology, to explore these questions and more.
All right. Hi, Jhon. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here.
Of course, we're happy to have you. So to get started, can you just introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So again, my name is Jhon Cuesta. I am from Bogota, Colombia. It's actually you should all visit Colombia, right? But then I studied languages. I am a teacher, right? Then I studied in Colombia my undergrad. Then I moved to the US in 2010 to get my master degree. And that master was in education. Eventually, I said, well, let's continue studying. So I decided to do my PhD in second language acquisition and instructional technology. That's the IT part, right? So that was in Florida. And then I moved to West Virginia. Immediately after I finished, I moved to wonderful Morgantown, and I just started working and developing some online courses in Spanish. I basically developed the whole sequence from elementary Spanish to intermediate, 101 to 204. And that's pretty much my work. I have been assisting teachers and students in the whole transition process right now with this COVID and moving everything to an online environment. So I have been doing that for the last couple of months.
And for anybody who's listening, Jhon has been so helpful as we've transitioned to online learning because of coronavirus. He's been so helpful teaching teachers how to teach online, basically.
Well, all the instructors have been really good learners, and they're they're all eager to learn and do wonderful stuff for the students, and that's what matters ultimately.
Yeah. So Jhon, I want to ask, there are I know a lot of people with degrees in education, degrees in, language acquisition and this kind of thing, but not as many people with credentials in instructional technology and I want to know how you got involved with this field. What sparked your interest? How did you decide to go in this direction with your studies, with your work?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I always wanted to teach, right? And then eventually when helping, because all my family, including my sister, my brother-in-law, they are all teachers. So then I actually, back in the day when I was very young, I was not even in college, I started helping my brother-in-law design some learning objects, some learning tools, right? So that's where I started saying, oh, this is great, using these authoring tools to create materials for students. And I knew back then that I wanted to be a teacher. And then eventually I continue my education, right? I started my undergraduate program and continue working and designing elements for my own students. And that's how kind of it started. Again, it's back in the day, but it's I remember that it was great to to be able to use like not only e-learning environments but other computer applications to actually implement them in my language courses. And then once I moved, my projects have been related to somehow related to computer applications, to computer assisted language learning, and always thinking about how can we use all the wonderful technologies that we have into our own classes. And that's why I decided to go for a PhD as well. And this PhD was perfect because it was the combination. Okay, teaching languages, second language acquisition, and additionally going into the IT and implementing in a systematic way all these changes, all these technologies into the classroom. So yeah, that's how it all started, and I'm glad I chose that path because it's been great for me.
Yeah, I mean, I can think back to my own teaching experience, and several years ago when the first time I used some technology in one of my classes, and how exciting it was. I remember it was like a vocabulary study tool, and and before that I had I had asked the students to study their vocabulary words and make flashcards on paper. And I discovered this app and I was like, oh, let's try it. And it was so cool and so effective. And that was kind of like the turning point for me, where I was like, well, if this is out there, if this is so helpful, what else can I find? What else can I find that will help my students study more effectively,
learning strategies,
save more time? What else is out there? And but I think that at least for me as a teacher, using a tool, using technology in the classroom is a very different experience from teaching online and having an online course. And I think probably a lot of students would see it that way too. Like when students think about online learning, I don't really know what they think. But for me, spending my first summer now teaching online, and in the spring a little bit, I've really enjoyed it, and I find it really effective. Like in some ways I enjoy teaching my online courses as much or maybe even more than teaching my face-to-face courses, and I was really surprised by that. So I just want to ask,
absolutely.
I want to ask you, what do you see as some of the advantages of learning online? What are the pros of an online class?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the ability for students to basically take any material that they want at their own pace, basically study it at their own pace, at their own not only time, but ability to organize what they not only want to learn, but how they want to learn, right? So that's something that's an affordability of learning online, right? And it's also cost effective, right? The ability of not having to move to many places, just being able and doing it the comfort of your house, right? And going even farther in terms of the content. It's not only what you get into your online class, but now with the internet, we have so many resources, so many, as you were mentioned, so many applications, so many things at our disposal that we can actually use and actually continue our ongoing learning process. So I think that's something that the online environment provides all of us, right? Both teachers and students. So yeah.
And I totally agree with you. And I'll add that I think so when I started approaching this, like teaching English online, I was kind of nervous because I was thinking, especially when it comes to language learning, I was like, oh, maybe you can take a history class online, or maybe you can take, like a sociology class online. But I don't know if you can take a language class online. Like, I don't know if you can really learn English online. because, how can you replace that face-to-face interaction? But I'll say that one thing that really surprised me is that I actually feel like my students in my online classes get more practice and they get more participation, because I have a chance to do things with them. Like, I have a chance to do with activities with every one of them.
Yeah.
Like speaking activities with all of them, whereas in the class, I have a limited time and I may only have time to ask one or two people and check how they're doing. But with an online class, I can give an opportunity to every single student and really check their progress. And that was something that surprised me. I actually feel like my students participate more in my online courses because there's not like the same time limit. Like they spend the same amount of time and I spend a little more time because I listen to all of it.
Yeah.
But from the students' side, I feel like they actually participate more and they use English more in class, than they would at other, in a face-to-face class. I don't know.
And that's certainly true. Like you not only have the possibility to meet with them live through so many different applications like Zoom, Blackboard, Collaborate, any other, but then you can use other type of tools to engage them, to promote their participation in an, as we call, asynchronous way, right? In a way that they can actually think of a WhatsApp message, right? You don't reply instantly, but then you can eventually reply to the comments of your partner, right, of your classmates. So there are so many applications and so many ways to promote that interaction, oral participation that doesn't have to be live, right? So there are we have talked. I remember the two of us have talked about tools like Flipgrid, VoiceThread that I'm sure are used in the IEP program and that are actually beneficial. Then when you see the threads that all the students participate and comment on each other's work, that's actually saying, okay, this works in promoting their engagement and participation, right?
Yeah, I feel like like I said, that was just something that kind of surprised me. It was something I didn't expect. And I was thinking like, wow, I actually think my students are using English more in the online class. Because I think when I started, preparing my online class, I was like, great, all my students are going to be in their pajamas. They're just going to be, it's not going to be like the face-to-face courses. But I've been surprised to see that I actually feel like my students are maybe using the language more in different ways, right? Like they're reading, they're listening, they're speaking, they're writing in every class. And
absolutely, even asking for more instructions, right? They have to use that language more, right? Like to say, okay, how do I send this assignment? That's already ways that we use every day, right? Like we write emails on a daily basis, and they are using that. They are actually, versus in class, sometimes it's like one person, right, raises his or her hand, and then that's it, right? Versus if you have an issue, you have a problem, you contact the student, the instructor, and it's a back and forth interaction.
Yeah, I feel like I feel like my students are using they're participating more and like the attention I can give them is kind of more personalized. Yeah, versus like in the class, you kind of look at everybody really quickly and you see like, am I understanding this? Am I not? Are they understanding? Are they not understanding? And you move on. And but I think with the online classes, I can really see, my students' progress and see where they're having trouble with specific things, and that's been really cool. That's been surprising for me as a teacher to see how.
And also, yeah, absolutely. To comment on that, also seeing the ways, the multiple ways we have to provide feedback, right? As you're saying, you follow their progress, and you can specifically tackle every single issue that your student has, right? Like, let's say a student is not using X or Y structure in a appropriate way, let's say, right? then you can specifically comment on that using it. I bet you use Google Docs, some other elements from Blackboard, like our LMS system, right? So the feedback you can provide can be really meaningful through this, through an online environment, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. And like I said, all of those things were just like positives that I didn't expect. And so that's kind of, we've been talking from like a teacher's perspective, but I want to talk a little bit from a student perspective, because I think when students think about online learning, especially online language learning, they probably have some of the same, the same hang-ups, the same concerns that I did as a teacher. Like, can I really learn English in an online class? And so, I mean, the first thing I'll start by saying is like, well, yeah, and I'll start by saying, you have, like I said, you'll probably participate more in your online class than you would in your face-to-face class. And well, first let me ask, do you have any other comments, on that from like the student perspective?
Well, like we kind of actually tackled that when saying there are so many tools, there are so many elements, activities that are being created by all of you as instructors, all of us, right? I also create activities in which students can benefit and can actually produce the language that is what is important, what is relevant. So definitely students should be comfortable, right, when choosing to take an online class, right, particularly the language class, because they will have multiple possibilities to produce the language, right, to explore other cultures, right? Because if we think of an important part of learning a language is also learning about the culture, about and think about the multiple million possibilities we have, even through Google Maps, through Google Earth. Now you can explore, go to a museum using through the computer, right? Like virtual realities and all that. So there are so many positives and so many useful applications. So you as a student who are potentially listening can take advantage, right?
Yeah.
To learn the language, to learn about the culture, and to succeed, because that's what we want, right?
Yeah, I just want to add to that. Like, I absolutely agree, and I also think that online teaching forces a teacher to be more creative, or like think about possibilities that if I was in a classroom just face to face with my students, I wouldn't have to be very creative. Like, I know how to do that, and I know the program, but in an online classroom, it's kind of like a new world, and I get to think about, all these different ways that I can bring these experiences to my students. And so it's kind of like you get the most creative side of your teacher. As a student, you get the most of your teacher's creativity, and I think that's kind of cool to think about, that in an online class, you get to explore options that are just not available in a face-to-face class, or that maybe they would be available and your teacher would not think about them because they don't have to. So that's been my experience.
No, absolutely. I cannot agree more. That's and actually that's one of the greatest part of, if we were to say about instructional design or creating materials for the students, right? This is actually the elements that you create are always thinking about how they can do better, how they can, and in an online class you have to think even from the design, from the moment that you start designing a course or designing the material, you need to think about, okay, what type of learners would I have, right? What would they be interested in, right? What are my objectives, right? And then, well, handling all those elements, then you actually say, okay, let's design something, let's be creative, let's try to do our best to give them something that they will not only enjoy but they will benefit from, right? Like they will actually learn from that. So that's the exciting part of this, and that's the challenge, yeah, for the instructors and for all of us, right, to provide good materials and materials that the students would potentially enjoy and learn from. Yeah.
Yeah, and so basically to sum up, if you're a student listening, don't be afraid to take an online language class. If it's in Spanish with Jhon, if it's in English with me, don't be afraid.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to ask your expert opinion for students. What are some things that make a student successful when they're taking an online class?
Okay, well, there are so many things so many things that we should consider, but think of we shouldn't think of an online class as this class in which I just communicate with the instructor once in a while.
Yeah.
No, communication is key, and I'm talking about communication not only with your instructor. Yes, of course, you will contact your instructor, but also think of this as the possibility to connect with all the other classmates that you have, right? Because this is we're creating an online like community, right? This course is, think of your face-to-face courses, but in this community, in this online community, you will interact with classmates, with instructors. So that being said, don't be afraid to participate, to ask as many questions, to provide as many emails, to be in constant communication with the whole course, right? Like, of course, oftentimes mainly the instructor, but also with colleagues, and don't think that you are alone on this, right? Because that's a crucial part. Other elements, I want you to think about how you organize your time, right? Because taking an online class requires a lot more of an autonomous person, right? Like, always think of how you could always do better in your courses and how you can organize your schedule, right? To not fall behind on assignments, readings, homework, and so on. So organize your week and always think of potentially staying focused for 1 to 2 hours. You don't need to study 7 hours with multiple breaks on a row. No, you can organize your time in a way that you studied, you really focus on the content for a few 1 to 2 hours, and then to keep productivity up, right?
Yeah.
So those are like part of all the habits that you will potentially develop, right? Other things such as going to a quiet space. You need to find your space for studying, really focusing on going back to what I was saying about focusing on your work, on the content. Mm-hmm. How do you focus? Having a quiet and calm place, right? So you can basically stay on the topic for X amount of time and be able to accomplish all what you have planned, right? So those are pretty much 3 crucial elements: communication, right? Study, like having or developing your own study habits, and managing your time as best as you can, right? Because you can succeed, but you need to be very organized and autonomous.
I think that is great advice. And I think so I mean, we as teachers also have been doing that. So if anybody's listening who doesn't know or who hasn't been here for 2020, everybody at West Virginia University since about the middle of March this year has been learning online and teaching online, and it's been really an experience. So I want to ask, what have you, Jhon, been doing personally to stay positive and productive while you're working from home, teaching from home? All the advice you just gave to the students was great. Do you have anything to say to the teachers?
Well, like concerning the teachers, what has worked for me is to basically organize my work. Right now, I'm in Germany, so pretty much I want to give you an idea of my schedule. It's
Our
like
podcast is international.
I get up, yeah, absolutely. I get up and work pretty much morning until 2 3 p.m. and then the most important for me, and maybe because not only I'm from Colombia, but I just really value the time that I spend with my family. I have a 21-month-old kid, so I just after three is just family time, doing things with my family, uh, like really enjoying life right with them. So that's what keeps me positive, keeps me motivated every day to continue working and doing my best. So just from a bike ride to a walk to just quickly grabbing something and eating it home or cooking. This is especially when in these difficult times, just being with the ones that we love and being with the ones that we care about. Sometimes even through Zoom, right? That's something. Perhaps you are alone or you are not with all your family, but you can always be in contact with them through all these apps. So yeah, I value family. I talk with my sister, who is back in Colombia, pretty much every day with my nephew. Yeah, just always finding things to keep me with a positive attitude. And I'm pretty much always with a positive attitude, but then I also need that push from family and and doing stuff that I like. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things, I don't want to say interesting, it's not interesting. One of the effects of this crisis that the world is in right now is, I think it's changed everybody's schedule, and it's like
Yeah.
totally turned life upside down. And when that happens, it makes you think about what's really important and what kind of helps you get through your day, and what you really value. And I would agree with that. I've been really thankful for the extra time that I get to spend time with my family. Like, I was just thinking, like, on the positive side,
Yeah.
on the
Absolutely.
positive side, when would I ever get to spend this much time with my family? So it's nice to try to have that perspective when we can.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I agree. And in these times, we will. I hope that we will change our mentality in terms of many things like consumption and as you said, what is actually important, right? And what is not, what is. It's time to reflect as well, right? Yeah.
All right, Jhon. So I'm gonna wrap this up, and I just want to ask you, one last question. What would you say to any students who suddenly find themselves online students, and what, just as a last comment, what would you
Yeah,
say?
yeah. Well, if you are in that fortunate situation, I'm gonna call it fortunate situation. Uh, think that you are not alone. Think that you have a whole system, a whole department behind you that can assist you at any time, including instructors, I'm sure potential classmates, administrators. So, and it going back to my previous comment, just keep be clear that it is communication is crucial, right? So don't be afraid of contacting people, asking for support, asking for help. Uh, we are all here to help you as students, right? Like we really care about you, and yeah, don't feel, you know, um, that you are alone in this in navigating through the online environment. You have that support, and don't forget, stay focused. You know, organize your schedule. Make sure that you engage with all the materials as you know, as well as possible, so you can succeed, because you will succeed. Yeah.
All right. I think that's a great. I can't think of anything better to say to finish us. So thank you so much, Jhon, for coming on our podcast, and we really appreciate your advice.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, and I wish you all the best, and things will get better. I'm 100% sure. So, fingers crossed.
We hope you enjoyed this conversation and learned a little about the upsides of learning online. To learn more about what we do at the Intensive English Program at WVU, connect with us on Instagram at WVUIEP, on Twitter at WVU_IEP, or on Facebook at Intensive English Program at WVU. You can also check us out on YouTube at youtube.com/WVU Intensive English Program, or send us an email at iep@mail.wvu.edu. Hear more episodes of this podcast at anchor.fm/WVUIEP. Thanks for listening, and catch you next time.